All right. Last night in Brooklyn, New York, not too far away from me, Lamont Roach gets a draw with Gervonta Davis. It felt to me like he did enough to edge it out, not by a lot. It was a very close fight, and I don't think a draw is some kind of horrific, terrible decision, but it did feel to me like he edged it out. Nibs, give me your initial thoughts and reactions to this one.
Um, I thought it was a horrible decision. I had Lamont Roach 8-4, easy, and you could say I could see an argument for even 7-5, but there was no way Gervonta Davis won half of those rounds. And then you take into consideration there was a knockdown. You know, a punch was landed. He took a knee. Now, did he take a knee because of the punch? No, but he took a knee. That's a knockdown, bro. In the sport of boxing, a punch lands anytime in the immediate future. You take a knee. That's a fucking knockdown. So there should have been that. And if that is scored, which I think should have been, even the ref told him so. Hey, look, things like this usually are a knockdown. If that's scored, Lamont Roach is the new WBA champ. You know what I mean? And new. I think Lamont Roach shocked the shit out of everybody, obviously. But what most people, like myself, didn't take into consideration is they got history. They fought several times in the amateurs. Considering where they're from, it makes sense, right? It's just like Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney. You kind of take the experience of what you've seen in the pros and kind of throw it out the window a little bit because of how familiar they are with each other coming up. And for me, this was that. This was Lamont Roach saying, "Okay, I know what he has. I can stick with him. I can do what I need to do. I know how to win versus Tank. Even though he didn't win against him in the amateurs, he figured some things out. And I
Well,
think Tank was just too drunk on his own shit.
just to jump in
Right.
real quick, Nibs, I think that plays into some of what we were talking about right before we went on air, right? Is it's like they do have history. And there was a little bit, I think the context that brought to the fight in this case is that when people fight Tank Davis, they know they're in with a destructive puncher. They know they know how dangerous he is. And for whatever
Of course.
reason, their history, their of knowing each other, he was looking at Tank the whole time like, I know what you really are. And it was like he knew something that we didn't know. And Jordan said it in my interview with him, right? His brother Jordan. He said, Tank has mental problems in the ring. And I'm gonna leave it at that. And anybody who grew up with him knows what I'm talking about. And I remember when he said it, I was like, that's interesting. I'm not really sure what he means. I just didn't know what he meant. You can check that out on our YouTube page right now. But as we're watching the fight, right, and Lamont is standing right in the pocket with him. His defense is super effective. He's throwing really accurate, and it looks like it's actually bothering Tank because it's so accurate. He's really doing a lot of good things in there. And as that's happening, Tank is doing things like having his face wiped down and talking to the ref, and then, if anything, trying to kind of bully the ref a little bit, and taking the knee and walking over and getting his face wiped off when, like you said, there's nothing in that in any rule book anywhere on planet Earth right now. Um, we saw some of those mental cracks. And so as the fight unfolded, I was like, that's what he's talking about. We just haven't seen anybody do it to him. But when Tank gets uncomfortable, he gets a little squirrely. And we didn't know that about him. And now that we do, it's a little tough to unsee it.
It's a lot tough to
Yeah.
unsee. And what's crazy is Tank was made to look really regular last night, which we've never seen. Let's be really clear. Tank has always looked very spectacular, right? He does what he normally does the first 3 to 4 rounds. He'll let you kind of open yourself up, even maybe let you get off, right? A lot of people says he does the Floyd thing where he'll let you kind of win the first couple of rounds, and then once he figures out how to crack through that, then the next thing you know, he's swinging for the fences and he gets most guys out of there. Lamont Roach was like, I know that's coming. Come on. And just throw your best shot. Hey, look, hats off to Lamont Roach. We sit up here talking about Tank Davis. first off, hats off to Lamont Roach. Hell of a fight. Earned all my respect. I'll be the first one to say I watched a lot of Lamont Roach coming up. I wasn't overly impressed. I'll be the first one to say it. I thought he looked regular against some guys I thought Tank would wipe the floor with. He got in there and proved, hey, look, styles make fights. He had a solid chin, an exceptional defense, and he was willing to trade with Tank, where I think that's where most fighters do get in trouble. They're willing to trade, but ineffectively. He knew exactly how and when and where to throw and pick his punches. I thought it was a perfect performance, and I thought he should have won the fight. Maybe they'll run it back, and we'll see what happens from there.
We can only hope they do, right? And I think for a lot of different reasons, I think there will be other fights now that Tank wants to take. He'll want to. Maybe this will push him to take some bigger name fights because now he did look a little, I guess we'll call him more ordinary against Lamont. The thing that I always knew about Roach coming into this fight, haven't seen him. He's always had a really good defense, right? He's always been a pretty difficult guy to hit. He's always had a pretty good IQ, good feet. And there was a
Right.
part of me that thought, if he puts all of that together and he's boxing and moving, I think he can have some effective rounds. And then talking to Rihanna Rios after her pro box fight, she was like, nah, he's hitting harder. And of course, people that are working with somebody's team would say this, but she was saying it very matter of fact, like he's hitting real hard. I don't think that he has like an ounce of doubt in him, and everyone around him is real confident he's going to win. And I think once he was able to step to Tank, and you saw in that, I think it was the fourth or the fifth, he took a big shot from Tank, and he kind of just put his hands down, looked at him for a second. That was a big moment because it was like Tank's used to doing that, and guys go down. And Roach kind of ate it and said, "What else you got?" And I don't know. We talk about maybe some of Tank's mental limitations. I think those are some of those moments that really play into the fight. And Roach was just so sharp, so accurate, had the right game plan. And I think several years of Tank not fighting regularly, right? Fighting basically once a year, talking about retirement in the build up to this fight, seeming generally a bit disinterested in boxing as a whole. None of that is aging well right now for him. You know what I mean? If he had gone in and demolished Lamont Roach, some of that goes away. But now it's all out in the open, and we got to kind of figure out, what to make of Tank
now. I want to say this, man. I think when guys have a regular looking night or they have a bad night at the office, we start looking for answers. I don't think we have to. And I'll say this because I think that you look at the other guy on the other side of the ring, right? This is a dude who's 130 pound champ. He moves up to 135, at which he looks very comfortable, by the way, right? I think this should be his weight going forward. He looked the bigger fighter. He looked a stronger fighter. He looked in shape. I mean, he looked like he could have gone for a couple more rounds, right? So against the boogeyman of the division, you know what I'm saying? He comes in there and puts on a hell of a show. I think against anybody else at 135, Roach might have got a dub. So
no, he's a problem for anybody at lightweight. I only say that to make the point that if you're looking at Tank and you're going, well, he's been sharper before. I think it's several years now in the last 4 years, how many times he fought? 3 times, 4 times? You know what I mean? And I think that is a factor.
I think you get drunk on your own success, right? You start reading on your headlines, right? And it's, we've all played sports before. Coach would tell you, don't read the good news. You know what I'm saying? Read the bad ones, the bad reviews. And it's, look, Tank is, let's be really clear. He's been able, with maybe one hiccup with Isak Cruz, where he hurt his hand and wasn't able to get him out of there. He's been able to just roll through everybody he's fought legitimately. He's been able to put people away. And he ran into somebody who didn't follow the script. And we saw that affect him. Do I think he'll go back to the drawing board? Do I think he'll sharpen his tools? Do I think he comes back even better next time around? I do. I don't think this affects Tank in the negative way. I think this makes him hungry to prove to people he's still who he is. And then, so I'm excited to see what Tank does next, because I think that'll answer your question. That'll tell us, hey, is he really on a decline, or was this just a
Right.
bad night at the office?
That's where I think that's where I say I think that it goes one of two ways. It goes the way that you're saying, right? And it motivates him, and he's a great fighter and he rises to the occasion and all that. I think there's also a possibility, to be honest,
Yeah.
that his interest in boxing has been in decline for quite some time now. And we've now discovered that when he gets comfortable, there are little cracks mentally. And Lamont Roach is not going to be the only guy that can bring that out. There's killers at this weight. There's Keyshawn Davis. There's Shakur. There's Mortaya. He's in with a bunch of lions right now, and he's kind of been avoiding that for a really long time. And he got in with a guy who was a real one, and he didn't necessarily rise to the occasion. Now it's one fight, and like I said, it could go the way you're saying. I think there is also a possibility though that we're just finding out a little more about who he is as a fighter, because it was something the Roaches knew going in.
Now, if Lamont Roach stays at 135 and gets another strap off of one of those killers you were just talking about, this fight ages well for Tank, right? If they don't
Totally.
immediately run it back. If Lamont Roach gets into his next fight and gets stopped, or gets embarrassed, by another 135 pounder, then we're like, oh, okay, well, it is what it is.
I don't
Or
think
maybe
that would
it's just the
happen
fact
though.
that maybe it's just the fact that they have a lot of history together. Like, these guys fought a lot in the amateurs. Tank came out on the winning end of most of those, right? But again, it gives Lamont Roach something to go back to. I know how to fight this dude. It's not like he was being blown away by Tank in the amateurs either, by the way, people. So I think Lamont Roach had his best night at the office. I think Tank had his worst night at the office. They came together, and that's what we got. I still think Lamont won the fight, and I'll be the first one to say I was the first. I was loud and proud about the fact that I thought Tank was going to wipe the floor with Lamont Roach. I had never seen a Roach stop a Tank before.
But those are the best moments in boxing sometimes, bro, when you get a surprise like that where you think, I know exactly what's going to happen, and it's just that's not how it plays out. My gut was always telling me that Lamont was going to compete, but it was hard for me to envision a world where he really stepped to and stood his ground against Tank and beat him in that kind of fight, which is what I felt like he did. How do you think a rematch plays out? I mean, it's tough. I don't necessarily trust what I see on the internet, but Tank, there is footage of Tank saying, "Yeah, it should be next, but it won't be." Essentially, like he's going to take another fight in between. But ultimately, these guys are going to have to fight again. It seems like.
I think it's something where, and I want to give Tank credit, because Tank has been a man of his word most of the time when it comes to making fights, right? He says he wants to fight somebody. He tries to go out there and make it happen. I think he does want to get this one back, but I do think there is a slight part of everybody who says, well, he was overlooking Roach because he's probably already got his next fight lined up. So that's why he's saying, hey, look, this isn't going to happen. I was expecting to blow through you. I already have X, Y, and Z lined up. So I think once he gets through whatever he had already had set up, he's going to, commit to that, and then they're going to run it back, if not immediately after that. So I think that's what he means there. I don't think he's ducking or running, from Lamont Roach at all. And there'll be people out there that say he is, and I don't think that's the case. I just think he had something else lined up already. And to answer your question, I think Tank better get on his shit. If he doesn't, we're going to get more of what we saw last night. And I think this time the judges are going to be more on their game. I don't know how two judges saw this even. I just don't.
Well, and the third one had it for Tank, which is even crazier, right? And
Right.
regardless of how long Tank makes Lamont Roach wait, I hope that he's able to get another big, meaningful fight in the interim. You know, ideally, you'd want. I think he's earned himself a shot against Keyshawn or Shakur, but he doesn't. He's not going to want to fuck up the opportunity to fight the rematch with Tank and get that win. But there's plenty of credible lightweights for him to get in with.
If you were in his camp, what would you say was, if they can't get Tank next, obviously they won't be able to. Who are you lining up?
I think I would try to get the winner of Zepeda and Tevin Farmer, the rematch. You know, their first fight was real close, and I think that Farmer could very well win the rematch. And I think that, Roach and Farmer, that's a perfectly credible fight. And I think if Zepeda beats Farmer, right, he's a top 5 guy at lightweight. But it's also a style that I think kind of favors a lot of what Lamont does well, right? Still a tough fight, but I think that that would be the fight at least that I would want to see. And if not for that, listen, I think that Murataya has been kind of knocking on the door for a big fight for a minute. That's another 50-50 fight as well. But those are some of the, the interesting fights. There's another guy, a Russian guy, very talented, named Zor Abdullayev. And he's got another fight coming up, but he stopped Jorge Linares a couple of years ago. Very, very tough guy.
I like the Tevin Farmer. I think that would be an amazing fight, but he's got business to handle first. I'll be honest with you, man. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back to, I wouldn't advise it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back down to 130, defends his belt, and then waits on Tank. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Sign me up for Lamont Roach and Shock Foster right now.
Right. Right. You know what I'm saying? Who wouldn't watch that shit? You know what I mean?
That's a real
Especially
fucking
after
fight.
what we saw. Yeah. So I mean, if you're Tevin, if you're Lamont Roach, you can say, hey, look, I can go back to 130 and be the A side right now. You know what I'm saying? Get more money. Then when Tanks handles whatever he's got going next, I'll come back up and be the B side again. But I'm not doing it unless I'm getting that Tank money. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think that's what's going to happen. Because I don't think there'll be enough money at 135 to risk catching that L. You know what I'm saying? Because, like you said, there's killers in the division. So,
yeah, he might be better off
doing
doing a unification with Shock or with Emmanuel Navarrete, or there are some real great fighters at 130 at the moment, and maybe those are the fights you should take.
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit for him at this point. And what's crazy is with all this hype and everything surrounding this fight, it wasn't even the best. It was not the best fight on the card by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, let's start going down the card, and of course, if we get more comments about the main event, we'll happily go back to it. But just before that, the co-main event, Gary Antoine Russell pretty much wiping the floor with Rayo Valenzuela, and I could tell you right now, bro, I was as surprised about that as you were about the main event. I did not call that. It felt like for Rayo, he boxed such a disciplined, calculated fight against Pitbull Cruz, obviously completely different style. Russell losing the close decision to Puello, having some inactivity. Just the way the momentum was going, it wouldn't have blown my mind if Russell won, but I never in a million years would have thought, that he would have just walked him down, been too fast, too powerful, too crafty, too everything, essentially take a 12-0 sweep.
And here's another reason why I'm mad at Tank. He made my predictions go 4-1 last night, and I can't even come on here and say I told you so today because of Tank Davis. Thank you very much.
Well, 4-0-1. So you're undefeated.
Yeah, 4-0-1. 4-0-1. But yeah, so I am still Mr. I told you so. I said this. I wish I had it. I could pull it up in our chat. I said, look, Gary Antoine Russell is going to win this fight easily. Like it's not going to be a fight. Everybody thought I was smoking. Look, hats off to Rayo. He's a great fighter. Gary Antoine Russell is different, and he's built differently. He had the one hiccup against Puello, right? But I'm telling you, he's built for this, and I think that his brother Gary Russell Jr. is doing beautiful work in that camp. Those guys
he's really great in the corner. But the reason why I wasn't as confident as you were, it wasn't even just the Puello fight, and we'll get into Puello, right, because he was in the fight before, but it was the fight with Postol where the stoppage wasn't great. I felt like he was kind of losing the fight. There's been, and those are great opponents, but there's been other fights where he looked a little shaky. He looked solid, but he looked like he was coming in second place, against other elite level guys. And I felt like he really did elevate his game to have like a career defining win against a guy with a lot of momentum. I can't remember the last time a Robert Garcia fighter got beat up and beat down for 12 rounds like that. And
And and I,
and
and I think Ryo had something to do with that, bro. The way his comments before the fight, calling Gary Antoine Russell regular. I mean, like you don't
that's
get much
karma.
more disrespectful, bro. Yeah, telling a guy, oh, he's just real regular. Okay, all right. It- Here's what was impressive
He's
about
a
that.
regular ass whooping. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What was so impressive was, I mean, I don't know how much were they pumping him full of gas in between rounds, because he was throwing heat all round, every round for 12 rounds, bro. That's impressive.
So I think when I noticed this when I was watching it, he's got a ton of knockouts, right? But what was really impressive about this fight was he was not loading up on his shots, bro. He was just letting it flow so beautiful. And Ryo just couldn't keep up with the tempo. He couldn't keep up with the variety and the hand speed. And I think he just kind of shelled up and started running out of ideas. And while he's doing that, he wasn't throwing any tens, but he's just hitting them with 7 after 7. You know what I mean? And you could see on Ryo's face, he mentally, I think, just started to run out of ideas about halfway through the fight.
I mean, he had Ryo's face bruised up after the second round. You know
Fucking
what I
him.
mean? Like, yeah, he was fucking him up after the second round. And I think that's when it was, for me, I started to see it after that. He was afraid of throwing with Russell. So, and then what do you do with a guy who's throwing heat the whole time? And then when you throw something back, it's like, if Ryo landed one or two, Russell's coming back with three or four. You know what I'm saying? And they're hurting Ryo
And
every
some of it
time.
was just good hustle work. He would just keep his hands moving, and for whatever reason, Ryo, even when he would make a miss, wouldn't always answer. Like it didn't look like. And I'm again not taking anything away from Gary Antoine, but I felt like there was something in Ryo's body language. There was a certain level of dejection, and it looked like I said, about halfway through the fight that he started to run out of ideas and check out a little bit, and thought, I'm getting through this. I'm gonna throw a big bomb now and then, and he landed a bunch of them, and they didn't do fucking nothing, bro. And he's a good
Yo, that
puncher.
the final round, I was like, well, where the fuck was this the whole fight? Like the final round, I was like, yo, if you'd have fought like that, yeah, the fight might have ended earlier, but we'd have had a hell of a fight if he'd have
Yeah.
started doing that, early on. And then you saw it when he returned fire. He had Gary Antoine Russell hurt legitimately a couple of
Yep.
times. It's just Gary Antoine Russell. He's got balls, he's got heart, and a chin, and he started
And an
swinging back,
engine. He's got a real engine to him too.
bro. I don't know what they're doing and Gary Russell land, but those boys are in shape. Like, I mean, good lord, that's one thing you can say about them. They're all in great shape, and I think, like I said, Gary Russell Jr., hats off to him. He got his brother prepared. You know what I'm saying? They knew what the game plan was, and they figured it out. But I to your point, I think there's more to that Ryo story that we just maybe not know, because it didn't he didn't seem in the fight. You know what I'm saying? Until it was absolutely, hey, in the 12th round, I have to go out here and knock you out. You know what I'm saying? And that we've never seen that from him.
He
You know what I
did
mean?
start to me, he started looking resigned to the result of the fight. Like, all right, this is what it is. So, and I think this is a good segue, but part of my thinking that Ryo would have more success in this fight was Russell's fight with Albert Puello, who beat Sandor Martin in the fight prior to that. I don't think he won. I thought that Martin won the fight. Again, another close one. And Puello is a guy, I thought he lost to Akhmedov. I felt like he lost to Sandor Martin the other night. I thought it was possible that he lost to Gary Antoine Russell. So there to me, Puello is as good as he is, and I think that he wouldn't compete at this level if he wasn't really fucking good. But it's been a questionable title run. I thought he beat Russell, but that was some of my doubt around Russell's ability was I was like, I know that Puello is good, but I just don't necessarily see like a star when I'm looking at Puello. And I guess segueing into that, it felt like Sandor Martin got the short end of the stick in another close fight with a champion. I thought he beat Teofimo Lopez, another one that was close. It seems like he throws really nice flurries. He's good defensively. He's got great feet. There's a lot to like. And I think, unfortunately, once you lose one close decision and another close decision, the game starts getting real used to giving you the short end of the stick. And I think it won't be the last time we see Sandor Martin, outclass a world champion or a top 5 guy and get the short end.
I want to say this, man. Sandor Martin got that shit on him. Like, and if you've watched the sport of boxing, you know what I'm talking about. I think it was. I want to say, give me right if I'm wrong. It was on the third, or in between the third and fourth round, where he was talking about he was seeing double vision. He got hit in some kind of way. He comes out and has one of the best rounds I've ever seen of somebody who swears they can't see. You know what I mean? So he's got that shit on him, and he's one of those guys, right? You watch Sandor Martin fight, win, lose, or draw, it's going to be entertaining. Like you said, all those names you just listed, this dude is going to put on entertaining fights. Puello, I don't know, man. I just was like, what is he doing? Like, is he fighting, or is he just in there to keep this dude off him a little bit? Like it with it, dude. Credit though, when he did throw, he was landing. Like he was very accurate. I just didn't feel like he was doing enough for me.
Yeah.
So for me, that's why I gave Sandor Martin. It was a close fight, so I'm not as upset about this decision as I was the main event. But I still feel, to your point, Sandor Martin again got jobbed, and I think it's just one of those things where it's a close fight and it goes to the other guy. But I definitely felt like I had him 7-5. I could have I would have been okay with a draw in this fight. You know what I mean? Because there were several rounds where it was very close. So, but I think he did enough.
It was tough because it's 2 counter punchers, right? And I think that's Puello's nature, is to be a counter puncher, and so it is for Martin as well. And so when one or the other would initiate, for me, what the difference was Martin's hand speed would just allow him to be a little more active in those moments and in those exchanges. Puello did a good job of picking his shots, in spots, but that's why sometimes it's a game of very small margins. It felt like to me, and to a lot of other people, that Sandor Martin won a close one here. He loses another close one after losing a close one to Teofimo Lopez. All we can hope is that he gets another shot at it, and that the game kind of recognizes that he's a super skilled guy. He put Mikey Garcia into retirement, and he deserves another go. Adam Hurley says Russell shouldn't be in a hurry to fight Puello. He has bigger fights ahead of him right now. You could be right, Adam, but listen, it's the one loss on his record. And whatever big fights he winds up in moving forward, which I think he absolutely deserves, I think those fights only get bigger if he were to beat Puello, both in a rematch and in a unification fight, where he would then have, 2 titles and be officially the top guy at 140.
Yeah, shout out to everybody in the chat, Jesus, Adam. I agree. I mean, I agree with there are bigger fights out there for him, but I think running it back with Puello for me is, it's that get back, right? You want the one L you have on your record, that you want to get that back as soon as possible. If you're Gary Antoine Russell, especially while you're hot right now, like right now you're riding one of the most impressive performances, like you said, we've seen from somebody who's a knockout artist. This guy's before this, all of his wins were by knockout.
Yeah.
This was actually more impressive than all those knockouts. He completely dominated a world-class fighter, a guy who had, just like you just said, had completely outclassed Pitbull a fight before. You know what I mean? So the fact that Gary Antoine Russell was able to completely dominate Rayo, not just barely squeak by him. I think this is, you want to strike while the iron's hot. Get your get back right now, then move on. to the bigger paydays, because those are going to come. You've got the you've got the Gary Russell name, so you're going to be able to get bigger fights down the road, and you've got a strap. So I think you're right. You run it back with Puello right away. You get that unification. Look, man, hey,
2 straps are better
it,
than 1, bro.
and people will not be able to avoid you at that point.
You're the guy.
Period.
You're the guy. Opening up the pay-per-view card, Joannis Tellez getting, I would say, a pretty impressive decision over Julian Williams, who, goddamn, he's been around forever, and I felt like he got in there with a young guy who's at the top of his game that's 10 years younger than him, that's got a lot less miles on the odometer. And J-Rock really fought a really smart fight. His footwork looked good. The jab looked good. The counter punching looked good. But Tellez knows how to pick his spots. He knows how to take advantage of little opportunities. And I think he hits hard as shit. And a lot of guys are not going to be as willing to step to him. He's not the most aggressive, but he stays on the front foot and he hits very hard. And in his 10th professional fight, he took on a world-class guy and beat him 9-3, 10-2, maybe.
Yeah, I had it 9-3, and I was being nice. Julian J. Rock, I think he's earned, a little, a little juice.
I thought he fought a great fight, man. It was just he was coming in second a lot of those rounds, and it wasn't that he was doing anything wrong. It was just that I think that Tellez is a guy with a certain trajectory that's a lot younger, and like I said, has less miles on him. But for me, this fight showed, J-Rock is still very much in play at 154 and probably even more at play at 160, where there's really less talent and not a defined top guy. I think he's a guy who's very much still in the mix.
I think he fought too safe, right? Because to your point, when he got his shit off, he was able to put pause, into his. It wasn't like, J Rock was just there being a punching bag. With his counter punching was beautiful. You know what I'm saying? Like his timing was still there. Even though his face was marked up, he was bleeding. He was in this fight, bro. Like I never thought for a moment he was going to get knocked out. Tellez was very aggressive, but in those moments where J-Rock was able to effectively counterpunch, I was like, yo, if he followed that up in any way, I thought he could have won more of those rounds, bro, because there was actually, I think it was 9 or 10th round. He had Tellez backing up, and he didn't keep going with it. He kind of just laid back again, and I'm like, nah, man, what are you doing? He didn't take advantage of, for me, of the moments where he could have put more on Tellez and probably swung a couple of those rounds, bro. I'm not saying he would have won by any stretch, but it definitely would have been a much closer fight, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm with you. I still think J Rock is, he's awarded himself another shot.
Adam says, you guys think that Tellez will ever be a factor at 154? I do, man. I mean, listen, you're taking these kind of fights in your 10th pro fight. Not everybody's doing that. That's for the Lomachenkos and the Keyshawn Davises of the world, and the David Morrells. And I think it's very possible that Tellez is that kind of a guy. There's still stuff to work on. He's 24 years old, 10 pro fights. But I also see a temperament there. It's tough to shake him out of the thing that he wants to do. And when you get up to the top of a weight class, that's a real talent. That's what, Shakur has. That's what Sky Nicholson has. Some of the, the smarter, more technical type fighters. You can't shake them out of that thing that they do. And I think that Tellez has some of that.
To answer the question directly, I think he already is. I think he's a factor that people are going to start paying attention to now. And I wouldn't be, mad at the fact that his next fight, or in one of these top 5 guys fights, he's in the conversation to get in there. You know what I'm saying? At 10 fights in, because of, to what you just said, look who he just fought. He's fought 2 back-to-back champions or championship contenders who were on the level. You know what I'm talking about? People were talking about if J-Rock gets another impressive win, he was potentially going to be a contender again for a strap or an eliminator. So you just knocked these 2 guys out. Why not? You know what I'm saying? And like you said, it's not like he's fighting bums. I don't think I've been unimpressed by anybody he's fought so far. So yeah, I think his next, maybe not the next fight, but in the next 2 or 3 fights, this kid might be having a strap around his waist, bro.
I think it's possible. I think he'll at least get a shot at it before he gets to his 15th fight. I think that's a pretty safe bet at this point. I guess the last one we'll talk about from this card was Johan Gonzalez beating Jarrett Hurd in a super physical fight. Jarrett retiring after the fight. You know, at Jarrett's best, he was such a force, man. He was able to take punishment and he would just wear guys down. And it was a really a thing of beauty to watch. But we always had this feeling like he's here for a good time, not a long time. And after the Lara fight, after the J-Rock fight, I felt like he tried to change his style. Some of that was successful, some of it wasn't. And there's been mixed bag in terms of the quality of the performances. But this was really the first time for me where I'm watching him where I felt like his skills and his body had eroded a little bit and he wasn't able to. Whereas before I felt like it was like a style choice. It's like, oh, he's trying to box more, but that's not natural for him. Now it feels like the mileage is really catching up with him. The Rosario fight was a tough fight, and I'm glad to see him retire. It's a nice win for Gonzalez, who fought a little bit dirty, but I think finally has like that notable win after kind of being a punching bag for Jesus Ramos and for Tellez. So congrats to him and congrats to Jarrett Hurd on, really a tremendous career. He was a guy that I thought maybe would do a little more, but like I said, good time, not a long time. And when he was at his peak, man, there wasn't a lot of guys who could beat him.
Thank you, Jarrett Hurd. Thank you for the career, being a class act. By all accounts, everybody who's dealt with him has said he's a great person outside of the ring, as but like you pointed to, there was a point where we were saying Jarrett Hurd was the man, right?
Undeniable.
Not questionably either. Like, he was the dude, and
he was the dude before it was Jermell Charlo. Like, when you think
right.
about the lineage of the weight class, it was him.
And then, like you said, I think he fell off a cliff after the J-Rock fight. I think his career was over at that point, right? And I think the fight subsequent to his retirement was just him trying to prove it to himself, right? And I think last night it was finally like, hey, yeah, time for me to bow out. See you guys later.
Right. I can't right the ship. I can't right this ship anymore.
Right. But when you're built like Jarrett Hurd, hey, give him all the chances he can, to right the ship. You know what I mean? If I woke up looking like Jarrett Hurd tomorrow, I think I could whoop somebody's ass too. You know what I mean? So, I get it. But thankfully for him, I'm glad he gets out now as opposed to when it could get real ugly. Because, we've all seen this story. It could get real, real bad. I know he would have liked to have gone out on a high note with a dub. But you know what? He's out on his own, and he was able to walk away standing up. So I appreciate it.
And walk away with his faculties. So that's always the most important thing. Pretty good card as far as the PBC one. I was glad to see a card like this back in Brooklyn, back in New York at the Barclays Center. It's looking like, my city's getting some more dates right now, and we kind of go long periods of time without having fights out here. So it's exciting to, of course, to hear the triple header announced for Times Square. There's some.
Hey, I'm just happy Amazon has gotten their shit together.
Yeah.
But that first card was rough.
Yeah, it was rough. I guess moving over to the Salida card, Subriel Matias getting, I would say, a pretty impressive win over Gabriel Goyaz, who was a pretty solid fringe contender to contender. But this is now Matias' second stoppage victory after his loss to Liam Paro. I believe with this win, he's now the mandatory to Richardson Hitchens. At least in this one, I felt like, Subriel Matias, he hits hard. He's relentless. It's an awkward rhythm, right? There's a lot to deal with, but it just feels like there's certain styles that are going to give him problems, and that style is literally Richardson Hitchens. And as
Yep.
great as I think he is, I don't see how he gets any of that momentum that he gets against other guys, because I just don't think Hitchens is going to give him those moments.
It's one of those things where we'll see, right? Because the thing that could possibly break down a Richardson Hitchens style is also what Matias does, almost, to a T, right? And, he pressures you, pressures you, pressures you, and once he finally gets his shit off, you're in trouble. You know what I'm saying? So let's be really clear. No matter what happens early on, Hitchens is going to look phenomenal, right? He's going to look like the second coming of, of Floyd Mayweather, in that ring. And then we'll see around 4 or 5 what happens. Like if Matias does what he normally does or should have done against Paro, well, none of that's going to fucking matter. You know what I mean? Because once he starts getting his shit off, it's a problem.
I felt like he did do it against Paro, but what Paro did really effectively was mute a lot of his offense, right? He did it by smothering, he did it by holding, he did it by knowing his distance, being all the way in or all the way out. And I just think Hitchens, stylistically, is at another level in terms of that style. Now, you're right. When we match Paro and Hitchens, Paro is not as reckless as Matias, and so you just have a two guys having a boxing match. Hitchens is a little better, and so he wins the rounds. I think the way that Matias throws those touch shots as he comes forward to kind of put you in your place, and then it's like how Beterbiev does it. He's going to have to do a lot of that against Hitchens, to be able to create those opportunities. But that is a great matchup. Matias is always exciting. He's yet to have a performance that made me not want to watch him anymore. And, he's always kind of one punch away, right?
And you know what? The thing that would fall into Matias's favor is that Hitchens is there to be hit. He's, you know what I mean? So if you can touch him, if Matias can touch you with a jab, you're in trouble. So we'll see. You know what I'm saying? But the flip side of that to it, right, that we've all seen, is Hitchens is a very masterful boxer. So it really, to me, it's I know it sounds corny and we say it a lot. It really does come down to who's going to be able to get their shit off. You know what I mean? And follow their game plan to a
And
T.
can he hurt Hitchens to the body? I think that's a big one too. Is can he find that moment to land that left hook? Because like Beterbiev, like a lot of great power punchers, it feels like a Subriel Matias fight really starts when he lands the first clean body shot, and you see how the other guy reacts, and they usually don't react well.
No, because for some reason God gave him bricks for hands. Subriel Matias hits like a heavyweight, bro. Like, I mean, he's made people quit. Like that's almost worse than getting knocked. That is worse.
And he doesn't load up, right? Like he does
Yeah.
have the one punch power, but again, we don't ever see him like lay a guy out. What he does is he beats guys up until they physically can't continue, whether they're quitting, whether they got a big ass cut over their eye and they can't see like Goya's, and then they get stopped, because their vision's all fucked up. He just beats guys down, and then once you're kind of at the end of your rope, that's when he really throws the bombs. It's a fun style to watch.
And he's got a chin. He's got a hell of a chin. So, I don't think there's anything Hitchens is going to be able to throw at him to put him down or hurt him in any event. And that's going to be a problem too, because if you can't hurt him or give him pause, he's going to come at you all night long. I think Hitchens is up to it though. I think I'm a Hitchens fan, bro. So I think he's up to it. I think he'll probably win a decision if it goes rounds. But if Matias can find his groove like he normally does in that 4, 5, 6 round area that we're used to, Hitchens is going to be in some trouble.
It'll be a fun one if and when it gets made. I hope we do get to see it. The last matchup that I wanted to talk about, it was on Friday. Really solid contender, Rocky Hernandez, getting a unanimous decision over Rene Gueron, who had just given Floyd Schofield a really tough fight. And Hernandez came in, and I felt like basically won every round. This was one of those fights where we talk about close fights and then we talk about competitive fights. This was a competitive fight that wasn't close, meaning that all the rounds were basically competitive, but Hernandez was winning them, and he was winning them because he's just developed a really solid combination punching style. He's not quite as hittable as he was earlier in his career, and I think getting stopped by shock in the last round and some of the other tough fights that he's had, he's like a young OG. He's 37-2 now. He's got a ton of experience, and particularly at 130 pounds, like we talk about, interesting interim fights for Lamont Roach. If he couldn't get any of the guys we were just talking about, I think Rocky Hernandez would be a hell of a choice.
Rocky Hernandez lived up to his first name, bro. Like, Rocky Hernandez is a bad man. You know what I mean? Like, he's got everything you want in a boxer, especially the smaller weight guys, right? And so I be honest with you, that would actually be a very interesting fight. I think that's more of a 50-50 fight than people might even think about. Like, when you think about what they do well, Lamont Roach and Hernandez, I know people are going to say, well, how would you say that considering what we just saw this weekend? I'm here to tell you, Rocky Hernandez was this close to beating Shock. You know what I mean? And I don't think any of us are ever going to say Shock isn't world class. So if you're that close, like literally from beating one of the top
He was
guys,
seconds away
period.
from beating a guy that I think real boxing fans know is like a great fighter.
Right. And let's be clear, it wasn't close and when he got stopped. You know what I mean? If he finds a way to make it through the 12th round, he wins that fight. Period. So I think Rocky Hernandez is a great fighter, bro. He's another one of those guys where if you see his name on the bill, turn it on. You know what I mean? Or if you're close to in proximity, find a way to be there. You know what I'm saying? Because he's going to give you some shit. He's another one of those guys that's got that shit on him. You know what I
And
mean?
this was a real valid win for me because I thought that Giron was very impressive against Floyd Schofield. He's one of those guys. He's been a spoiler multiple times in his career where they test prospects against him and he beats them. He's just a tricky guy, and I saw this as a real 50-50. And then to watch Hernandez, who I think, obviously got knocked out by Roger Gutierrez a couple of years ago in the first round, had the shock fight. There's been some disappointment, but I feel like he's refined his style just enough to where he's like a world-class action fighter now. And there's going to be guys with a certain style that give him problems, but he has developed into more than just like a rugged veteran. He's a world-class guy now.
I mean, you could take it again. It's another one of those things where, the guy loses, and everybody wants to look at the guy who loses as a bum, right? In the immediate aftermath, no matter who that person is, everybody's like, oh, he's this. No, he's still a guy. You know what I mean? Like you said, you could put him in there with just about anybody else, right? And flip a coin. Rocky Hernandez. Look, man, I'm here to tell you that dude probably should have a strap by now. If not, I think his next fight should be 4-1.
How fucking great would him and Navarrete be, bro? I mean, that's just got fight of the year written all over it.
Bro, now you're talking dirty. You know what I'm saying? Now you talking.
A guy
dirty,
can
bro.
dream, right? A guy can dream.
Yeah. That's you putting that shit on right now.
Now, hopefully that's when we get to see one someday.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Well, it was a solid weekend of boxing, Nibs. Thanks to everybody in the chat. As we always close out our episodes, tell everybody about the importance of supporting local boxing.
Look, man, I think anybody who's ever even heard of boxing knows the name Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., right? Guess where he started at? He started in a place where, most people, when he started boxing, don't even own shoes. You know what I mean? Most people's houses have dirt floors, right? And he became not only a popular figure, but a legend in his country, not just his city, not just his state or town, but a legend in the country. And people don't forget it because that's where he's from. And he said something, a quote back in the day: "The fighters are born; they can't be made." And I want people to understand that when you are a fighter, when you're a boxer, you have to be different than the rest of us, right? A lot of us can go to a boxing gym and try to get into shape, but you get in there and somebody else punches you really hard in the face back. It takes a lot to keep coming back every day and saying, I want to do that for a living. So think about that every time you see these local guys who might not have the best records, who are showing up on regional cards, and you're thinking, oh, well, that guy's a bum. Go to a ring and let somebody punch you in the face, right? And then say, hey, I'll come back tomorrow and let you do it again. That's what these guys are doing. They're born. They're not made. We can all go try it. These are guys who are born to do it. Show up for them. Show them that what they're coming to work for every day is worth it. Support the guy, again, or girl, right, that was your neighbor, you went to high school with, you know what I'm saying, that might work at your local convenience store, you know what I mean? And we just saw it with Padley. The guy's got a day job working construction or working as a pipe fitter. And hey, guess what? He was available. He gets on. Now he's changed his whole family's life because of his availability. And you know what? The people back home are supporting him the hardest, and he wouldn't be where he is today without, again, the support of his local community. And again, you supporting local boxing is supporting yourself. So do what you can.
Couple of shout outs in the spirit of supporting local boxing. I want to shout out my guy Harry Gigliotti, who I met doing commentary a couple of years ago, who is now a world champion in the world of bare knuckle boxing. And he sort of spoke that into existence on the Slip and Weave podcast a few years ago. And not even with the intention, I think, of being full-time in the bare knuckle world, just taking the best opportunities that were in front of him. And he's really made the most of them. And I saw some pictures of his most recent title fight. So I wanted to congratulate my friend Harry. I also wanted to shout out our guy Corey Erdman, bro, friend of the channel, working the Rocky Hernandez fight, and then the next day being in Puerto Rico to work the Subriel Matias fight. So Corey Erdman, one of the real movers and shakers in the sport of boxing. And check out the Slip and Weave podcast this week. We're going to have Cordell Booker coming on. Corey's going to come back on the show at some point too. And this has been a great episode, my friend. It was a good weekend of boxing, and it was just great to have it in my city where we don't always get to have that.
I want to shout out one thing really quickly because you just mentioned this. Great corners. People don't give them enough credit, right? Boxing is a team sport. It's an individual event, right? I want to say that again. Boxing is a team sport, an individual event. Yes, you have to go out there and fight the fight yourself, but a great corner can make a world champion out of a guy who might be regular, right? So people think, oh, the sport of boxing, you only have to be a boxer. Sometimes guys get into this game and they become great cornermen. They become great cutmen. They become great, ring generalists. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people forget those are the guys that make those champions and sparring partners. Those are the guys that make those champions. So I just want to shout out to all the guys that we don't see or don't get the credit for those championship straps as well, man.
And specifically, at least for me, Lamont Roach Sr., kind of MVP of the weekend, who I think just did a beautiful job guiding his son to a masterful performance and really impressive stuff. Nibs, hell of a show, my friend. We will catch you guys next week.